Congratulations, everyone. You've made it to the last session of Sunday here. And before you know it, we'll be done. You have a party to go to, I'm sure at least 3 or 4 or 5 tonight, for those of you that made it thus far. This will be a fun one. Now, we talked about all kinds of remote productivity, and everybody has seen all the different networks and services out there. This is going to be a little different session. We're going to talk about iPad, DaVinci Resolve, and just one other piece of hardware, the super dongle, this keyboard. That's it. Okay, I don't want to talk too much about services and getting things in and out. We're not even going to touch too much on the cloud component of Resolve here. We have a session for that tomorrow. I'm going to jump more into that. What I really want to talk about is how to actually utilize an iPad with Resolve to be productive in the field, really what the subject really is. For me, I've always understood that content creation or filmmaking is a collaborative process. Who agrees with that statement? Right? Everybody agrees with that. I never got that memo, not at all. I've always been the guy who tried to do everything by himself, from writing to shooting to doing the post to even doing my own assistant work. I can't even hire an assistant half the time because I like to be in control. I like to do those things. I probably should have been a photographer, but nope, I like creating content. So this is a really good application for me. So ever since I got my hands on an iPad, I've always had this vision of myself just sitting in a jacuzzi and editing something on my iPad, just because I could get out of sitting in front of my computer, right? Because it's great, but there are advantages to being out in the field. I shoot a ton of time lapse. One of the things I'm going to talk about is time lapse and how to work with them in here and how we can process them. We have a little thing called the Time Lapse Tuesday. I'm from South Florida. I do a lot of video for local government. I do stuff for the city that I live in, city of Aventura. And one of the things that we came up with was Time Lapse Tuesday. Every Tuesday we come out with an aerial time lapse or something of the city to just have more engagement on social media. And it's been a hit. But that's a ton of shooting, okay? So they like my time lapses. Hey, next week we need another 40. I'm like, great. When am I going to process all of these? Because, you know, of course, when you shoot a time lapse properly, you don't want to do it in camera. I mean, I don't want to process it out and then not be able to really control it. I want to shoot raw. I want to be able to stabilize. I want to deflicker. I want to do all that. I want to work in whatever tool is necessary for that. It just happens to be the Resolve is one of the best tools in that, but there is a limitation doing it on the iPad, even on the desktop, because raw is the limitation. The iPad, one of the limitations we have is we can't work with raw. All right, so hopefully that will be a change. For me, it's kind of not a deal breaker because of something I like to introduce in my little remote productions called an intermediate master, where I will actually do everything on my desktop. If I need to do a one-light color correct or something, or audio sync, clean it up, just make sure I have a perfect piece of media to work with. I will, if I'm going to be cutting it on the iPad, most likely if it's a long piece of content, output that as H.265 using the main 10422 profile that gives me full grading capabilities, and I could put a couple of hours of them on my iPad and not worry about working with it really fast, because with the M2 processor, it will be hardware accelerated in encoding and decoding ProRes and H.265. So you could do all that on the iPad. So that being said, I promise not to spend too much time on doing the slideshow. I'm going to get right into working on Resolve. But there are a couple of things I want to talk about and show you. There's the cut page, the color page. Those are the things you see when you launch Resolve on your iPad. Those are the things that have been shipped. There are a couple limitations with that, and I'm going to show you some advanced utilization. Okay? So there's two versions that we know about. There's the basic version that's free, and there's the studio version that's $95. This is not the same as the $300 studio version that you get on your desktop, right? And that's great because it means that you're buying this through the App Store and it's not tied to the desktop version. You can, on the desktop, download all your betas and all that and not be tied into Apple's licensing policy of waiting for how and when that gets released. So it's really cool. Is it a replacement for the desktop? How many of you think your iPad is a replacement for your desktop? It could be, right? If you have a desktop with you, it's not a replacement for your desktop. If you don't have a replacement for your desktop, guess what? It's a one-of-a-kind item you're never going to find anywhere else. People always ask me, what's the best camera what's the one in your pocket? What's the one you have? I have an iPhone with me that I just took with me this time around, and I got some beautiful shots in Lake Mead yesterday. We'll actually grade one of them. I'll show you how to work with that beautiful HLG footage that comes out from your iPhone and see how we can actually work with that in here. What are the limitations? I mentioned one, RAW. We can get video out of here because this has USB-C, so you can connect it and go HDMI to another monitor and go full screen on that, or do the mirrored screen on there if you choose to. But if you want to go color manage through an Ultra Studio, that's not currently supported, so that's not there yet. If you want to do voiceover, for example, you can't really record audio in because you can't capture anything yet. Not into Resolve yet. You can use a third-party tool for that. So some of these things are important for me, and they're not yet available. So you're going to need a workaround for that if you're going to try to do everything remotely. But for me, again, I don't believe this to be a replacement for my desktop. I have a very specific use case for this tool for me, for which I will not bring a laptop or a desktop with me into the field. And these are some of the things that I could use it for. For one, if I'm doing any kind of DP work, if I'm on set, if I'm shooting, if I want to figure out what this thing is going to look like in post, I want to grade it before I commit to shooting the whole thing. So we do have Resolve Live in DaVinci Resolve, where you can actually feed live video directly into Resolve and grade it without actually capturing anything. Because we don't have that capability on the iPad to capture, we don't have Resolve Live working, right? But we do have the ability to import media. So we could import that media, we could grade that media, we could generate that LUT. That LUT can then be exported into camera, into monitor, or into Premiere, Final Cut, or any NLE that you're using, and you can get the looks that you're building straight in here. So again, in the field, this is very important for me because I'll show you, like, some of the stuff I do has some horrible lighting environments in it, and it's really bad. I do a lot of these shoots for the city council where I'm at, and I'm going to take a shot straight out of there and show you how I'm going to pre-grade it, and then show how I build a LUT out of it that we could throw in camera so you don't have to worry about that again. So that's one thing. Editing on the go, Cut's great. Cut is a really good user interface. If you've seen 18.5, Cut has gone and grown up a little bit. So you don't have to constantly switch to edit to do the things you want to do. So Cut will be enhanced. Color is fully featured. I mean, you pretty much have all the tools in color that you have on the desktop, with the limitations of some of the things I mentioned, like RAW not being present. You have the ability to build any kind of look. And this is extremely powerful because I personally love to work with my mini panels. I work fast. Do you know why you have control panels in Resolve? Why they were invented in the first place? Why it's important to have them? Well, you have this thing called muscle memory when you work, right? What's the muscle memory when you work with an iPad or a computer? You move your mouse, you move your keyboard. What else do you move? Your eyes, constantly back and forth. That introduces fatigue over time. That repetitive motion of moving your mouse and looking at where it's going, because you don't know where it's mapped on the interface unless you're using a Wacom, a stylus, where you can memorize the exact location of where things are pixel to pixel. You're looking there. That creates fatigue. And the rule of thumb, you spend 45 seconds on a primary color grade, period. If you take more time than that, you shouldn't be bidding on a feature film, because you're not going to do 1,100 shots in 5 days, which is what most bids look like these days, right? So if you're going to be grading with something that does not eliminate muscle fatigue and give you the ability to use both hands and see stuff, you're not grading efficiently. So that creates an efficiency beast in you, to have a control surface, to have all those calibrated monitors and work really quickly. What does that take away from you? The ability to just sit there in that jacuzzi and just play around, right? I want to play with a shot for 3 hours. Why? Because I can. And I can do that on a plane where I'm stuck and I can't go anywhere else other than watching some nonsense on a TV that's probably not even working, like my flight here. Or I could actually build a grade, create a LUT for it, load it into my camera, I'm ready to shoot with it. Not only that, I have the full tree that I could send to my colorist so they could take it a little bit further. And that's a great starting point. So I definitely want to talk about that. Now, there are a few other things in here. That's the elephant in the room, right? It's like, where are the other tabs? Right? There's media, edit, fusion, fairly. You know how I said you need another piece of hardware? Well, there's a third version of DaVinci Resolve. I call it the one with a little dongle, Bluetooth dongle. It's called a keyboard. Okay? If you have a keyboard shortcut that you can access, you'll realize that Blackmagic is a wonderful company. This is not DaVinci Resolve Lite. This is not, oh, we took just a couple of things that work and gave them to you. This is, oh, no. This is the full version of DaVinci Resolve. We packed everything in here, except we're not going to advertise things that don't work yet. Okay? They're there. If you got a keyboard and you know how to tinker, You can. I'll show you how to do that. But keep in mind, it's not an advertised feature for a reason. Okay? Especially when I go into Fusion, if I do that, we will probably have 3 crashes per minute. It's a guarantee. You know why? Because it's not optimized for iPad memory. Who has a 1 terabyte iPad Pro M2 in here, or better? Okay, so none of you have more than 8 gigabytes of unified memory, do you? You didn't know that, did you? The M2 processor on Apple only gets 16 gigabytes of unified memory if you get the terabyte version or not. I didn't know that either. I bought the 512. Yeah. So you're going to be limited in memory. So what I want to also start making you think about is the opposite of what you're doing on the desktop. On the desktop, we want to work raw. We want to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, on it. And then we want to suffer in misery while we try to output it, right? We wanted to utilize every clock cycle we have in our GPUs so we could bring it down to its proverbial need. That won't work on the iPad. We have a limited amount of unified memory, and you have to actually step back and take a look at how it used to be done, right? Anybody ever use a Flame or Smoke or any of those systems? No? Well, they actually had something really smart in there. They had something called a commit, a hard commit or a soft commit. And what that means is you can take what's in your timeline and you could write a new file, right? Now, if you export that file and you re-import it, you have some new media. That's called a hard commit. You've really hard committed to that. You're not making any changes. Now, if you have a soft commit, you might have some kind of an abstraction, like a cache note, or the ability to render in place and replace it with the rendered media and then go back if you want to decompose it in place and make changes. Resolve has all that. It does it differently than everyone else, though. So we only see one timeline when we get into this thing. So let me just jump into this thing and show you what I'm talking about. And when we look at our timeline, first we need something in there. This timeline is going to be unified in color and in cut, right? So when I go between these two interfaces, all I do is click a button, nothing else. I'm not sending it to color. I'm not retrieving it to color, so I'm not doing any round tripping. I'm not doing any dynamic linking. I'm not exporting or importing XML. That's the important part. I thought XML was the holy grail until I started trying to be productive. And you wind up having errors. How many ever saw that error? You know, your time, whatever, your frame doesn't match up every time you bring your result. Every single time I do that. And then I have to now look at that. I mean, what if that is a really big mistake and I have to fix that? So that creates all kinds of problems. So in Resolve, all of these elements, once you bring it in, it's accessible throughout. You're not sending things back and forth. And this is why it's important to understand that this and the desktop version is not the same as, say, using Final Cut and LumaFusion, or using Premiere and Rush or something like. It's not, because you're not exporting anything and re-importing it back in, unless you want to, unless you're doing a hard commit or you're doing something like that, right? So Cut is a very simple interface. It's been redesigned for not necessarily touch. I think what Blackmagic originally intended with Cut was to have a really fast way of laying down your narrative. So you can go in there, drop everything, whether it's synced with the multicam or just if you have a tape of time of day time code, you could watch it, you could mark your in and outs, drop it in the timeline fast, and then hand it off to a real editor so they could trim and edit, that kind of thing, right? So that's really the concept behind it. You can definitely cut in Cut. I think Cut is one of the most fun interfaces to play around with. But you might want to get into Edit as well to do some more stuff in there. So first, let's talk about how we're going to get some footage in here. The iPad's not the greatest thing for syncing with Dropbox. You guys have learned that, I'm sure. Okay, there's all kinds of issues there. Like, it's sunk, great, now let me copy it over. It doesn't like to copy any of the folders, great. Let me recreate the folders, move the media one by one, pain in the ass. But nothing beats SneakerNet in this regard. So by remote with an iPad, when I say remote, I say you're in a cave somewhere without any access to anything. Even your phone doesn't work, right? Let's say that's the remote I'm talking about. So you're not syncing to Dropbox to get your media necessarily. It's a good to have. All of these clouds are, but you want to be able to make sure you have enough storage locally. You have USB-C on here, so you could hook up a hub, and you could turn this into a desktop. How many of you like to carry a desktop with you? I don't. So I actually like to keep everything in here. So again, intermediate masters, projects I'm working on, and fast drives that I could just Velcro on the back of this thing if I need to, are the way essentially that I would work with it in remote. Now, if that's not the case, if you do get a lot of footage, like yesterday I was shooting on my iPhone. That was my camera. And I was shooting ProRes. and I want to get that very quickly into my phone. You don't need network access for AirDrop to work, right? So I was able to just throw that over, and that works too. As far as working with my C70 or anything in the field, that's why I got a lot of storage on my iPhone. I have a card reader on it. I dump everything from the memory card on there, and then I can AirDrop it onto here if I need to go. So you do need to do a few different approaches to it. It's not the same operating system, right? Even though it's the same code base essentially of tools that we have here, iOS and macOS, it's still based on the same thing, but it's a different UI, and they have different abstractions of how they deal with stuff. And one of the biggest ones that I think is an issue that needs to be worked out is file management. That gets a little hairy on here. So sneakerness the key. What works for me? I'm going to go to import some media on here. I use Dropbox, both personal and I have one for work. As you can see on here, nothing's coming across because I intentionally don't have any connectivity right now. So I brought a lot of stuff onto my iPad. The iPad, when you install it, there's a couple of things in here that you need to look at. You guys know you have a DaVinci Resolve folder right there on your iPad. There's a really good reason for that, right? If you open up that folder, you'll find some cool stuff in here. In DaVinci Resolve, you'll find, for example, the LUT folder. When we build LUTs that we want to use in DaVinci Resolve, that's the folder you put them into. You don't go into your preferences and open up the directory in there like you do on the desktop. You want them to go in here, and you'll be able to access all of your lookup tables. A few other things in here probably. You could see your proxies and what have you. And your cache clip. These things add up. You want to clear your cache every so often because I had 80 gigabytes of cache on my iPad, and I didn't do anything but just, use my iPhone and stuff. So it caches all that stuff. It adds up really, really fast. So be sure to empty that out every so often. So additionally, on my iPad, I've also put in a couple of favorites, which I like, and this is, the media that I have on here that I brought in. So I'm going to bring in a few clips that I want to work with. Just grab a few of these time lapses. Let's bring them in just so we have something to work with. The first thing that's going to pop up is, like any other editor, you've seen this before, is whether you want to conform and change the timeline to match whatever your footage is. If you don't know what your footage is, but you know what your timeline is, leave your timeline at all. That's probably the frame rate that you want to work with. However, if you want to guess based on the footage you're working with, be my guest. That's what I'm going to do here, is going to do it based on that. And we have our media. When you bring the media in here, you have a little tab here. You could click on it. If you just scroll through, notice that it allows you to just scrub right through it. If you have it selected, you can scrub right through and see what's going on. So all of your media shows up in this particular viewer right here. And if you click on that icon, you could change it to icon view or list view. You have a couple of ways in which media is organized on here, right? So this thing right here, that's a really cool one, the source tape click. If you click on that, this allows you to very quickly organize all of your media in your player based on time code. So if you've shot a whole bunch of stuff and you just want to linearly lay this down in timeline, get rid of the fat, and you don't want to figure out which clip goes first, right? Just click on that. You can see all those little tick marks. Those are all the different clips of media on here. So you can just scrub through all of your media very quickly and see exactly where it is, right? You don't have, and as you move, right, you see the clip that you're on. As you click on the clip, you could see where you are in the timeline. So it's very quick to make a select. Yes, we don't have a source and record monitor, but you could. That's a keyboard shortcut. Remember, everything is a keyboard shortcut if you don't have an icon for it on screen. So you can get to virtually anything in here. So our timeline down here, we can throw stuff into our timeline a number of different ways. If you grab a shot and you just drag it down here, it will drop it into our timeline, and we can move in our timeline. There's our clip, press play. We have all of our controls right there for our transport controls. We have the ability to perform a number of different editing operations. I'm going to show you a couple of these. These are really cool. You also have the ability to determine that you don't want to bring in the whole clip, but maybe part of a clip. So if you're viewing the clip in here, either as one clip or you're viewing them by looking at the whole string based on that source tape playback, you can just mark an in by clicking on that button and an out by marking that button, and then use one of the editing operations to bring in. So let me show you a few of the ways in which we can do this, right? So I brought in, where's my pen? I brought in a clip and it dropped it down here. We see two timelines, right? There's a blue line up here and there's a close-up of this clip right here. What that's telling us is it's giving us a really quick overview of our entire timeline and also showing us a zoomed in view so we can work. And that zoomed in view works in two different ways. You can have a playhead that stays in the middle and the timeline moves around it, or you can move the playhead freely, right? That's either a locked or a free playhead. That's that button right there, right? So this is different than edit or anything else we ever use, because what's the #1 keyboard shortcut you remember in Premiere? Zoom to fit, right? Zoom to fit. Always zoom to fit. That's the #1 thing you do. Shift Z in Final Cut. That's the one thing you commit to memory. That doesn't need to happen here. If you're in edit, yes, you will use that keyboard shortcut. In here, it'll do absolutely nothing for you because there's no zooming to fit. Why? You always zoom to fit up top, and you're zoomed in at the bottom. This is kind of crazy. This is the first thing you'll need to get adjusted to. Instead of looking at the zoom level you want, you always see both, which is kind of ridiculous. So adjust where you're looking at. You can use this playhead, and you can see I'm moving along my entire clip, or I could drag this playhead, and you can see I'm moving along my clip where I'm zoomed in. Two different views. As I move to one end of the clip, right, you can see there's a little arrow pointing down, this little white thing right here. That is a smart edit point. It's telling me that that is my closest edit point to my playhead. And if I perform an editing operation, that's where it's going to go, potentially, right? So what are these editing operations that I can perform? If I take this other clip right here, and wherever my playhead is, if I click this button right here, notice what happens. Well, wherever that white playhead was, it's going to insert that clip and push everything else over. That's the behavior it's going to utilize there. Let me undo that. Undo or redo. It's at the bottom here. If I want to use the same exact shot, right? There's that same exact shot. Where would I have that, right? But I want to get a close-up of this, starting from this point on. Of course, I could do a cut, and I could do a push-in, and I could do all that work. That's real simple. But there's actually a tool for that, right? I could just go ahead and click on that. And what it did is it took that same exact clip, and it did a one-to-one push. So I did a jump cut to 100% zoom with one click. I didn't have to do 5. Because everybody does that, right? You do that all day long. You put on a cut, you go in there, you move it around. Before you know it, you've spent half an hour trying to zoom into a shot that all you needed to do was hit one click, right? So that's a great starting point. Let me undo that. There are a bunch of really clever editing modes in here, right? Some of these are also like the edit point or transition. So let's say I'm going to go close to the end of this thing, and let's go ahead and add another clip here. I can just drag that in here as well. There's that edit point. Now, if you go to the edit point right here, notice that I have red lines there. I can not add a transition on there. And that's because I've been putting my full media limit in there. I've been putting my clips in there from start to finish. I haven't done any trimming with them. If I want to trim these clips before I add them in here, I should double click on that clip, select the in and out point that I want, and then use just the part of the clip that I want. That's going to allow me to be a little bit more selective, and now allow me to add just the parts of what I want into my shot rather than adding the whole clip and now trying to remove stuff from the shot. So the strategy is very important. Let me start that again. I'm going to delete these clips, and we can do that again. Let's say I have a piece of video that I like. I like where these clouds start moving across these cars. We could set that as an in, move across, set that as an out, and I can just drag that into my timeline, and there's that little clip. Again, I don't have to be very precise, and working with your fingers, if you're not using with the stylus, all you have to do is get close enough, like I plop it there. You could see where my little white arrow is, right? That's where my closest edit point is. So you just want to be a little bit further. Let's move that along, get in there. So that's where that is. Find the next clip, set the in and outs, and you could also set an in and out by just dragging with your finger. Notice the visual feedback that you will get. And again, just click on that, drops it at the end of the timeline. So as we perform these operations, we have edit points. And if the edit points have handles, right, I'm going to click on those edit points. You could see they definitely have handles because they're green now. I can actually click and drag that edit point. So that's going to change the location of where that edit point is. That's called a roll cut that I'm doing if I click on both of them. Or I can just, let me go ahead and move around here so I could see where that point is. If you just select and click one of the edit points, you can perform what's called a ripple. So you're just basically trimming one part of the clip. So you probably heard Jeff Greenberg mention today, if an application doesn't have a ripple edit, it's not a real editing application. That's very important because, again, when you're trying to be efficient, it's about removing steps. Everything could be done with cut, copy, and paste, right? You could do every operation that way. Are you going to get there in time? Probably not. That's the only limitation of that approach. Now, as I start doing this, right, here's my little edit point in the middle there, or if I want to cut right in between two clips, I have other options, right? You can see I can just cut, and that'll just drop that right in the middle, do a little insert there. I have an edit point that's atop. By the way, we now have split cuts inside of cut with 18.5, which is awesome. So we can do a split edit. You can do a J cut or an L cut. Who doesn't know what that is? Anybody doesn't know what a J cut or an L cut is? Great. I'm glad you mentioned something. So if you're not an editor, you probably never heard of the term. So very often, what you want to do is you want to see picture before you hear sound, or the other way around, because it helps with that cut, especially if it's a jump cut. Right? Very often you'll see a lot of YouTubers use this technique, so it gets, you know, it's like one phrase after the other, just really works well with jump cuts. Well, if you're using this atop kind of thing, that's a great way for you to start a clip before the other one ends, and you don't have to worry about doing the whole split edit. So that's a quick little workaround, but you can now do that, right? So if you put this one on top here, that's great. If you put this one on top here, you got basically what that is your J cut, and you have your L cut. So that's basically where you get that term. What comes first, sound or picture? Now, as I'm working with these clips are working just fine, right? I want to show you a little bit of the process of how I get them to be just fine. Because these clips, they don't come that way out of camera. All of these were shot, and let me just play a few of these back so you get a good idea of what we're talking about. So this is just one of the time lapses. But you can see I have some tilt shift effects happening on them. Everything is super smooth. These were shot on a drone, and there's no motion whatsoever. And it's not because it wasn't a windy day. As you can see those palm trees swaying. It was pretty windy, right? So there's lots of post that goes into this. To get this shot to look like anything, there's a lot of work that happens. I used to spend quite an extensive workflow where I used LR time-lapse to keyframe changes that I would make in Lightroom across the images just so I could process out my stills. Then I would create a ProRes 444 movie, then bring it into Resolve. The whole process of processing out one time-lapse could take hours, if not days, in that approach. And yes, if you want the best possible quality, that's probably what you want to do. You don't want to capture an MP4 inside of your drone and consider that to be a usable file. So what I do is I capture everything raw, Cinema DNG. Obviously, I can't bring it in here. So what I have to do is create an intermediate master. Let me show you some of these things. I'm going to get out here and just go straight into Files. And in my Files, let's go to I think I have some additional footage in here somewhere. Hold on. I know I have it here. Oh, here we go. So here's one of the files. I'm just going to open one of these up. As you can see, first of all, it's vertical. Right, so I need to kind of flip it. Second of all, it's moving all over the place. It's kind of wild. You've actually seen this shot. It looked really nice. It doesn't look like this, right? So when we go back to Resolve, you look at this shot, color graded. It looks really awesome. That's the same exact shot, right? A lot more stable, better color. Now, this took about not too long to process in here. So first, the step of how do I get it to a format where I can actually work with it in here. I want to use a piece of software that costs about 30 bucks or so on my Mac called TLDR, time-lapse something or other, I don't know. TLDR, it's a little utility, you get it. It allows you to bring in raw images from whatever camera you have. It has some brilliant algorithms. Let me show you what the UI looks like. It doesn't run on an iPad. It's a desktop piece of software. So, but I do believe, do I have an image of that user interface? Take my word for it. TLDR. Great little piece of software. They have a demo. The only problem with it is it doesn't do batches, so you do one at a time, but you drop all your raws in there, and I leave it at default. There's one setting that I have clicked on by default, and that's its deflicker algorithm. It actually uses a really good deflicker algorithm, so it'll remove a lot of the flickering that you get in time-lapse without having to add plugin in Resolve. And that spits out this file for me. So this file right here that I just showed you, where is that? So these files, you can see they're pretty big, 3 gigs or so for, I mean, this file right here is about 10 seconds long. It's about a 3 gig file. It's a ProRes 444 full size, whatever that resolution was on there, you know, 4K or more image. I don't scale it down. I don't do anything. The only thing I do is make sure I don't introduce any color issues to it. I get as clean an image as out possible. And I use TLDR to do that. It's automated, pretty straightforward. Now this file I can actually bring into Resolve and start working with it. So let's bring this into Resolve. So back in color, right? Let me go into my list view. And I'm going to choose Import Media. And let's go back into my iPad under my source. I'm going to bring in that one shot in here. Let's go ahead and work on that. So first thing, that's not the orientation I'm working with. And I don't want to start by rotating everything I bring in. I'm going to have 20 of these things I'm going to bring in. I can batch this process. It's simple enough. If you open up any of the shots that you're working with, right, just right-click on it. You should be able to get clip attributes. Assign a keyboard shortcut to that if you use that regularly. When you get to clip attributes, this is where you can do quite a bit of damage. If you take a look on here, you can specify your frame rate. If you're bringing in a sequence and your sequence is a wrong frame rate, like it came in at 30 and you want it to be 60 or 24, this is where you actually change that. So you also have the ability to change your aspect ratios and most importantly, your image orientation, which is what I want to do here. I want to make sure that this image will always come into proper orientation and I don't have to take another step of rotating and repositioning and scaling it in my viewfinder. That's just a big waste of time. And you also have some flipping here. So I will take a look at that. I want it to rotate counterclockwise or to the left. Rotate 90 degrees to the left. As soon as we close this window, boom, there's our shot. So now we could drop it into our timeline proper. We can do that. If I have something with audio channels in it and I want to get rid of, it has like 4 tracks, I want to keep 1, same thing. Go to the audio tab, remove what you want, reassign audio channels. This is how you work with your media. Again, this is the same as what you would do on the desktop version. There's nothing different with this particular version on here. Now, let me also create a new timeline for here, or actually get rid of these guys. Put it in here. Now, when you bring this into, my timeline's a 1080 timeline. This thing is really huge. I'm just going to bring it in here. You could see, well, it's going to zoom to fit and do all that. I'm not too concerned about this because I'm actually going to take this into Fusion to fix this a little bit right in here to stabilize it because I don't think the stabilizer on this particular footage is going to work well any other way. And I know I could use the planar stabilizer in Fusion to do this. So we're going to use that. And I'm also going to color correct it, but I'm going to just use a couple of really quick nodes on this. So first thing first. I'm going to obviously frame this and make this look right. So if we open up the inspector, we have a few options for that. If you scroll all the way down and open up retime and scaling, you'll see that you have a spatial conform under scaling here that you can change. And you could just go ahead and say, go ahead and fill it. So it's going to fill your space with your shot, so you're good to go. If you get rid of the inspector, you have more room to work with in here. You could actually click on this button right here. This right here, that opens up all kinds of wonderful controls. So if you click on that, you'll see that now you can manipulate your image in all kinds of lovely ways, including if you click on this scale tool, you can actually scale it and move it around and really get the composition you want. We don't want that. Let's undo that. So whatever our framing is, let's say that's pretty good. And that's a good looking shot. Now we can stabilize directly in here without going into color, without going into Fusion, without doing anything else. You have a whole bunch of controls right on here, and there's one that looks like a camera. That's actually a stabilize button. So that works really well. If you click on that little stabilize button, you have the ability to choose the level of stabilization you want. You have perspective, similarity, and transforms. Perspectives will actually warp to manage the shift in perspective that's happening there. So if you don't have a perspective shift, you might want to change that. Similarity, don't have a really good definition for that, but it works sometimes. Transform only does PTZ, pan, tilt, rotate, that type of stuff. So I'm going to keep it on perspective just to see what it does and run it. Again, really fast. That is a ProRes 444 giant clip. It crunches in here. Because ProRes and H.265 optimized on M2. This is an M2 processor that's crunching through this. The only thing that's going to slow this iPad down is when I run out of memory. That's when you need to render, if you can. So you can see, perspective here looks like crap. What does it do? It makes everything wobble like jelly. This is not a really good application for this. I'm like, oh, one of the best stabilizers on the planet, I can't get it to do anything with a simple shot like this. Right? So you might want to try a few other things in here, right? Let me stop that. Select that shot. We could choose similarity, see what that looks like, restabilize that. And let's go ahead and play that back, see what that looks like. Not too bad, still not stable. And probably translation for this particular clip will be the best, but still, it's not going to be rock solid. All right, so I'm playing it back. It's probably the best looking thing here, but you can see it's still floating all over the place. Right? It's not really giving me a steady shot out of this at all. So I'll address that a little differently. Don't want to do this. I'm going to just turn off stabilization for now. There's a lot more to do this. If I go into color, under my color interface, I have a lot more that I can do on here, right? I have all my color correction nodes, which are great, so we can actually make this look the way we want it to look. But can we stabilize in here? We could. The same exact algorithm that I just used in Cut is available in here. If I click on this little icon, there's that little camera. But as you can see, here's the tracking data we had from Cut. It's actually visible here. And here we could actually go in there some more and control our cropping ratio, our smoothness, our strength, whether we wanted to crop or zoom in or not at all, and if we want to do a camera lock and not have it move at all, lock it down. So these are some features we now have available in addition to our translation. But you know what? Resolve used to have a whole bunch of legacy stuff, like cloud trackers and stuff, and if you click on that, you actually still have all the classic stuff that's not GPU accelerated that's available in here. So you have a ton of tracking capabilities right there in color before you even leave color. So utilizing a number of these will give you slightly better results. Ultimately, it's still going to wobble, trust me. With this, I picked this piece of footage for a reason, because I can't get it to work well with anything. So before we go into the next part of this thing that I want to show you, where I can get you more stuff on here, let's make this look good. So color correction, and before I get into a complicated example, maybe a simple example with Be-Do. So I'm going to bring in another shot and import some media on there. And this is going to be one of the shots of, let's say, the Hoover Dam that we were by yesterday. And there's some great footage in here. See if I can find a shot that I want to work with. Why can't I find that shot? Just when you think you finished downloading, it probably didn't download from my phone. Ah, but it did. So when you shoot stuff from an iPhone and you think it's going into folders you can actually find, it doesn't. Why? Because when you share it from an iPhone, where does it put it? Into Photos. And Photos is a database that's managed by iOS, just like it is on your computer, which is why it's very important to understand. If you're not going to be managing a media manually by putting it into this directory, keep in mind that you are going to have to use a different import on here for some of that other stuff. So if you click on here and you hold, choose Import Media from Photos, right? This is all the stuff that you brought into Photos. So yeah, when I used my phone to send all that stuff in, it didn't ask me for a directory. It just magically appeared on my iPad. How did it do that? Well, it went into Photos. And this is why it's important to utilize that little setting here. So I'm just going to grab a random piece of footage here. There, that looks cool. And again, it comes in just as fast. I'm going to right-click on this thing right here and choose Create Timeline using Selected Clip. Boom, there's that shot. Now, this shot comes in a little bit washed out. Anybody know why? Color space, right? Color space transform needs to happen here. So this particular shot, not looking as good as it did on my iPhone. Obviously, I want to color grade it some more. And if I'm going to shoot more with that iPhone, maybe I should make a LUT so I could load it into my phone and shoot it with that so it looks exactly like I wanted to do. So we're going to do all of that with this particular clip. So first, let's go into color and let's understand what's happening in here. The environment that we have set up in here, if we click on our preferences and we'll look at our color management, we're set up for basically, it's not color managed at the moment, but you do have full color management in here. So if you are using DaVinci Resolve color managed, or it's all included. It's pretty cool. So that makes it easy. I'm not going to change too much in here for color management. I'm going to leave it manual. I'm going to use a color space transform in order to get this into the right space. But on my iPhone, when I shoot on my iPhone 14, it's shooting it at 2020, not Rec 709. And it's also shooting it with the color space for HLG 2100, not what I'm used to seeing with my Gamma 2.4 in a regular Rec 709 video file, which is why it's so incredibly washed out. So if I navigate to my color tools under my library for nodes, and go to effects right here, right? You can actually navigate to a whole bunch of effects. These are all the same ones that are on there. And one of them is the color space transform under Resolve Effects Color. I'm going to just never drag an effect into the empty area. This is one thing that I thought was always okay, but I learned it's not, okay? Always put a corrector node first, right? And this, you will learn, is the only way you can use that node properly with its masking and color correction and everything else. Because if you just drag one of these effects nodes out here, it's not necessarily going to make it a corrector node with that effect. It's just going to be that effect node. And you might not have its corrector values available. So if you're ever adding one of these effects, always start by adding a serial node first. Click right there. And then take your color space transform and drag that right on top of it. That's the right way to add any effect in Resolve. If you ever just start out by dragging that one thing over, there's certain things that don't work, like qualifying it. That won't work properly. And I want to qualify it. I want to use the magic mask and all that stuff, and I don't want to use a different node and map in a mask and all that stuff. So OFX nodes like this carry over the mask, so you want to make sure you apply it to a corrector node to do that. So you could see that the first thing that happens is this node comes in, I add another node as a serial node, and in color, when we're working in color, we're working in a node-based environment. Who's never seen a node-based environment? Everybody's seen one. Okay, you haven't seen. Who's never color corrected with a node-based environment? That's different, right? Compositing is a very different animal. Compositing, you're using nodes to do atomic operations. Like here's an input node, here's an output node, here's a merge node where I'm going to take this input and put it together. Each of those does its own little atomic thing, and yes, you have some really uber nodes that do a lot, and some just do one thing, but you can kind of look at the whole tree and figure out what's going on. Color's no different. And there are much fewer nodes in here, right? The most important node to understand that you have is called a corrector node. A corrector node is going to be one which you can do color correction with, period. Animate and do everything else. Every node pretty much in Resolve, for the most part, to begin with, is a corrector node unless it serves a certain utility, right? A corrector node can have any number of those effects applied to it. A corrector node could be connected to another node in, well, at least 4 different ways. You have the serial connection, right? The serial connection allows you to have one effect, and then linearly, or right after, in a serial connection, you have another effect. So effect 1 gets processed, effect 2 gets processed. So first node, second node, just like that. Then you have this thing called parallel nodes, which are bizarre and unique and only really make sense if you're a Resolve colorist. If you've never seen a parallel node in Resolve, you don't know what the hell that thing is. And it's complete opposite of how you would work anywhere else. Because if you take 2 nodes and you put them together, what do you get? The result of the 2 nodes. If you take 2 nodes and you put them together using a parallel mixer, what do you get? Nothing. It ignores the nodes completely. The pixels in those nodes don't matter. What matters are the corrections in those nodes. A parallel node will process the corrections applied to a corrector node in parallel, in tandem, instead of one after the other. That's all. So if I take one node and attach another node to it and make one of them black and white, what's the result going to look like? Black and white, because there's only one correction, right? You didn't do 2 corrections. You're not, the pixels aren't mixing. And then there's a layer node that we all know about. The layer node allows you to basically take that layer and mix it using blending operations. Well, Resolve 18.5 has graduated and given you blending operations in every node. Every color corrector node now has that. So you can do some crazy stuff in there. They also have this thing called transform, which is sick. It basically turns color into a compositing interface. So yes, you can take 2 different sources and put them on top of each other and match move them and do all kinds of stuff. Yes, I'll show you that too. But first, let's jump back in here and talk a little bit about getting this shot. So when I add the serial node afterwards, I could have done this to the first node, but the first node I'm going to always leave alone in case I want to do some kind of a change on it. You always do your primaries or your density when you start with anything. And that just basically means you're going to go ahead and you're going to drop the lift to where black is black, and you're going to get your whites to where white is white using gain. And that's something we will definitely do. But before we can do that, we need to make sure we're seeing this properly. And there's so many different ways in which you can color process. I want to spend a little bit of time on that. First, this color space transform. My input color space, as you can see, can be whatever it is. And this is coming in off of my iPhone. So it's going to be Rec 2020, BT 2020, I believe. And my input gamma on the iPhone should be HLG 2100, Rec 2100 right here. So if you just turn this on and off, it's subtle, but it goes from being washed out to actually, being properly exposed there. Again, these are not the looks that I want. I got a lot more data in here. So on my iPhone, this is a ProRes clip, right? And with ProRes, I should have a lot to work with. So what I want to do is, I really hate how digital this image is looking. I want it to look a little bit more organic. I want to bring some of that sky back. I really want to see some of those red colors in here. What I'm not loving is these digital processed colors. So I'm going to step it back a little bit. And I'm going to create a 3-strip color process where I'm going to take this one digital ugly image, break it down into the individual red, green, and blue channels, color tone them with CMY, and then convert the color negative that I generate into a positive, and then start my color grading process. But instead of doing that every single time, once I'm happy with the way it processes it, I'm going to generate a LUT so I could load that in my camera, and it does it for me every single time, or a timeline does, right? And this is something you can do with everything. So I've made my conversion in here. Oh, hold on, make sure this is connected. Careful when you drag these around. Let me just hide my effects so I could see more of my node tree. You know that parallel node I talked about? We're going to start working there. First, what I want to do is I want to add another serial node that I want to start with. And then I'm going to not click that. Hold on a second, I'll do that. I'm going to click the next one over, which is going to be a parallel node. So you see what's happening here is I've added a parallel node that says, hey, the process, whatever's going to happen afterwards is going to go into 2 nodes. And those 2 nodes, whatever you do to each of those nodes, that's going to get processed together in here, and then it's going to go out somewhere else. So instead of doing one thing and then the other thing, it's going to say, do one thing and the other thing in tandem. This is really cool. So we know in compositing you have this thing called concatenation, right? There's math that's happening. If you ever used Photoshop, who's ever used Photoshop? Okay. You ever bring an image, rotate it, scale it up, scale it down, save it, and say, why does it look like shit? Does it ever happen to you? Yeah, because what happens in Photoshop? It's a destructive process. The math concatenates. Every time you do an operation that has to round things off, an integer up or down, you're throwing stuff away. It's gone forever. And if you're doing a serial process where you rotated something and you've thrown that information away and now you go to another process, you want to rotate it back, well, it doesn't have the information before it was rotated, so that's going to take this rotated ugly thing and rotate it back, and it's going to look even uglier. But if you do those things in tandem, you rotate it this way and you rotate it that way, and then you process it, cancels each other out, right? So you're not losing quality by doing it one after the other, you do them in tandem. That's what parallel is about. That's why we're doing this in this particular mix. So I'm going to add another parallel node in here. Not like that. Make sure this guy's selected. Hey, what's going on? Undo. Okay, sometimes it acts stupid. Guess what? We can do it manually. Let me go delete that. Put this guy in here. I'll put in here. I'll put in here. And I'll put in here. So it still works the same way. You could add more inputs. The idea is these are all corrector nodes. Doesn't matter what order they're in. 3, 4, 5. So the math makes sense to me. Numerically, they're cool. And you can actually wire these however you want, so it looks good. So if you do it wrong, that spaghetti there is for you to rewire it proper. Now, these are going to be my individual red, green, and blue channels. I'm also going to color tone each of these with a serial node. So this looks very complicated, I know. And the reason I'm showing you this is not because this is what you're going to do every time you're on a plane trying to color grade. But if you come up with a great idea like this, you can actually engineer it and then save it as something you could use practically everywhere. So one more thing I'm going to do is at the end of my parallel mixer, I'm going to add another serial node. Okay? Now we could label all this, and we could take the time and right-click and label all this. I'm just going to skip all that because I want to spend more time building it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to separate our image into the individual red, green, and blue channels. Now, there are so many different ways, and it's crazy. So I'm going to show you my favorite tool in here for doing something. This is a tool I use extensively for doing black and white looks. This is a tool that I use for doing cross-processing to create some really nice color processed image. But most importantly, it's one in which I can actually break it out into the RGB channels. So if you click on this little icon right here, because we can't see everything on our iPad interface, click and hold, you should be able to see not just the camera raw, but if you click and hold it, hello, you should see things like the RGB mixer, which is what we want. The RGB color mixer allows us to determine what the input and output colors are of each of the red, green, and blue channels. So we have the red output. It's currently outputting red, which is great. The green output, which is currently outputting, you guessed it, green. And the blue output, which is outputting blue. That's a normal image, right? If I flip them around, I'm cross-processing it. So what I want to do here is I don't want color. I want to use this as a monochrome mixer on each of these first 3. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on monochrome. And everything turns black and white, right? I only did one node as monochrome. Why did it all turn black and white? Parallel mixer, right? Because it's mixing them all. It's the only one I'm making a change to. So I want only red. So I'm going to take green and blue out of the equation. So this is just my red channel. But basic math. I had 1, now I have 3. So I'm going to have 3 times as much what? Picture, density, everything. So I need 1/3 the opacity. So I need to only have 1/3 red, 1/3 green, 1/3 blue. And that's achieved simply by selecting this little icon right here, which gives us our key. And our key is referring to the matte for that particular node, right? Or the opacity for that node. Now that node has a whole bunch of crazy math building it, right? It has things like a key output, right? It has a qualifier output and has a key input, right? The key is one type of matte. The qualifier is a secondary selection, another type of matte, and you can control these individually. So my key output, that's my combined opacity of this thing. That's it right here. So if I just click on that, and let me use my keyboard to type that in here. I'm just going to put 0.33 in there. There we go. That's the third. You see some color shining through the other ones. Here we go. We'll do the same thing with all of these, actually. Before I go change the colors in them, I'm going to do 0.33 in all of these. And I'll do the same for these toning nodes. This is important. Otherwise, you'll have an image that is too saturated, too bright, too everything. And one more here. OK. So this one, we've changed our RGB mixer on. I'm going to do the same with these. Monochrome, green, monochrome, blue. So what I've done with these is made these red, green, and blue channels, but it looks very black and white right now. We need to color tone this. We need to add some color to it. This is where understanding a little print helps, or how the actual printing process happened when you worked with film. So we're going to introduce cyan, magenta, and yellow to each of our red, green, and blue channels. So I'm going to add cyan here. And again, I'm going to use the same RGB mixer. All I want to do is suppress red from it and keep it color. I want to do the same thing for this one, suppress green for it. And now I have my magenta. Oop, what did I do there? I clicked on something. My magenta, did I reset? Yeah, there we go. And this one's going to be yellow, so I'm just going to get rid of blue. So now we have our yellow. Now, everything looks almost good, right? We went from, well, yeah, that's not right, right? It looks negative. It became a color negative. So this 3-strip process introduced us to now a color negative. And this last node we added, we go to the positive, click on that. I'm going to change the hue from 50 to 0, or 100. It's the same. And what you'll see now, oh man, it looks exactly the same, doesn't it? We did a lot of work to get right back to where we started from. Or did we? Let's take a look. I'm going to turn this off just ever so slightly. What are you seeing? I haven't added any saturation. None whatsoever. Same density. We're just processing this color a little differently. It's richer, feels a little bit more organic. We haven't changed the color at all, right? We haven't toned it in any possible way, but it looks like we've added saturation. And if you look at skin tones this way, or really, if you have something that has really nice color, but you just don't have deep color, you're losing that color, and saturation just breaks it apart and looks like crap, use something like this. This works really well. And you know what really works well? Is when you start messing with the density of these individual ones. And before I start even doing any kind of correction, if we go back to the red, green, and blue nodes, and I'm going to go back to where I have my density for my key output, and I start changing that. Look at the water. I have some nice rich blue water coming back there without toning the water at all or changing any color. I'm just changing the density of my red negative. I can do the same thing with my green negative. If I go to my green negative here and change the density of that, lower it or raise it, you could see how it changes some of that toning. And again, with the blue as well. So we can get a really nice deep color out of it without touching saturation or anything else at all, right? So this would be my first start. Let's say this is what I want to come out of my camera. I don't want that silly iPhone image that I had before, right? Then I can go ahead and turn that on. This is what I had. This is what I got. I want this to be my starting point every single time I shoot, right? I don't want to have to go through all those notes. And this is before I start doing any kind of color correction or grading. This is my LUT. Right? So you know how you get that Rec 709 LUT you apply for someone? I want this now to be my LUT. Instead of doing that Rec 709 LUT that I can buy from someone or use anyone, I want this 3-strip Technicolor thing every single time. So I'm going to right-click on here, or just click and hold, and you could see you could generate a LUT. I'm going to generate a 65 cube LUT in here. Anybody know where it goes? Yes, right there. So I'm going to give it a name. We're going to go ahead and call that our 3-strip TC. Okay, that's good enough. And open that up. So now I have that as a LUT. The other thing that I want to do is, this is a good starting point, but you know what? That's not a calibrated monitor. I'm in the field working. My colorist is waiting for this. He wants me to send it to him to, take it to the next level. but I'm on a plane. I could just send him the grade, right? That's really easy. The way you actually send the grade, or if you guys want the grade or transfer the grade or keep it in a collection, is by getting a still, right? So if you take a still of this image, let's go back to our color right here, click and hold. Notice how you have the ability to grab a still. If you grab a still, what does that do for you? Well, it creates a still. So you can go to a different shot, you can bring up that still, and you could try to color match the two of them by looking at it side by side. That's the initial use of a still. But what does a still carry with it? It carries everything that's been applied to it. It's grade. A still carries a grade with it, and you export that still, you can export the grade. So if you click on Gallery, you'll see that there's our still, and if we right-click on this still, right, you have the ability to export. And I'm going to go into a folder that I have on here somewhere. Hello, looks, and let me go ahead and call that my 3-strip. Okay, now this creates a file for me, actually 2 files. Let me open that. And that right there, that's my 3-strip color correction that is showing up in stills. Notice that in my gallery view, there are 3 folders in here. This is actually pretty cool. So stills, power grades, and timelines. Stills refers to any still that I've captured in this session, right, that I'm working on. Power grade refers to any timeline I'm using, right, in here, or any project that I'm using, right? So if I create a new project, but I want to use that grade, that 3-strip that I created, if I move that into power grades, and I could use it across all my projects. And timeline allows me to, hey, I have a bunch of different cuts that I have. I have a trailer, I have my feature, all that stuff. Well, you can access a grade from a different timeline. There's timeline 2. Maybe I want to use that grade from here, or this grade from here, whatever grades I have anywhere else. So allows us to really quickly get in there and find them. Most importantly, let me go ahead and grab a different shot from that same series, not necessarily even that same one. I'm going to right-click on here, go to Import My Media and Photos. Let's go find another shot, like let's say this one right here. And I'm going to go to Color. Actually, let me just edit that. Actually, we could drop it in here. Where's my media? Okay, and there is that other clip. Obviously, this clip does not have the same color, right? I did not want to go through that whole process, even, changing the camera. If you just go back in here, all you have to, there's nothing going on here, as you can see, nothing happening here. You have your gallery, so if you find your grade, you can go ahead and just drop that on there, and there's your whole tree. So that can come across, looks great on that shot too. Imagine everything you shot came in that way now because you created that look. So now I'm going to undo all that, and I want to bring in that LUT. If you go to LUTs, go ahead and refresh my folder. It didn't necessarily show up there because I didn't quit Resolve. So if you click on that and you hold refresh, there it is. There's the 3-strip. I'm going to apply this now to the same shot here. Boom. There's that same exact look. No nodes, nothing, all built into a LUT that we can now transport, and you get that nice little monitor, hook it up to your Atomos, boom, good to go. So I shoot with a C70, I shoot with Blackmagic cameras, I shoot with Red Raw, I shoot with just about anything I can get my hands on. I use this on everything, right? So if I have my little Blackmagic Assist to record with, or an Atomos Ninja or anything, they all take LUTs. I could throw a LUT in anything. My GH6, this can now put a Panasonic LUT on that as well, so I could throw that straight into my camera and actually see it the way it's going to be graded, not the way I'm shooting it. Because I like to shoot everything in log. I like to shoot everything flat. But that doesn't mean that everybody knows what I'm looking at. And it's helpful to be able to do that. So a very useful application. Makes my iPhone infinitely more useful now. Because when I get to put this together, all I have to do is start with that grade. Right? That's just the starting point. We haven't done anything else yet. Here, I'm going to show you a couple of these other looks and how I built them. I know we have, how much time do we have? I don't even know what time it is. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, you guys don't want to go to a party, right? We're here for a while. We still have some time. We got another 15 minutes. I want to open up some Q&A, but I did want to talk about at least one thing that I know we need to get to, and that's a keyboard shortcut. Command, Option K. That's going to bring up, well, you got to give it quick enough. That's why a software, when you do Command, Option K, will give you something else. But if you press them all together, what you get is the keyboard shortcut list, which is the most important thing ever, because it gives you all of the things that you don't see, including if you scroll to the bottom, you'll find something here called Show Page. Notice how I assigned a whole bunch of keyboard shortcuts to that. That's what you should do if you want to do what I'm going to do next. Assign a bunch of keyboard shortcuts to this so that when you want to do that, you can just do this and that. Hold on. Control. Did I not put the right keyboard shortcuts on there? Let's try that one more time. What were my shortcuts? It is Command-Shift. Command-Shift, that's why. No, not Command-Shift, Control-Shift. Control-Shift. So I set up Control-Shift and a number for that. You could use whatever works for you. But if you look at that, Control-Shift, why is it not working? Look at that. This is what happens when the demo gods are not on your side. Let's try that one more time, sometimes. And this is actually part of what you need to do is constantly restart DaVinci Resolve if you're going to do what I'm going to do, because you need to be able to go in and out of that mode. Let's try that one more time. I was kind of hoping it would crash and I wouldn't have to restart it, but that didn't happen. Okay, Shift, Control, and let's try that again. Let's try that again. Oh. Okay, well, I'm going to just add another shortcut to it. So if you want to open a specific page, like let's say I want to get into Edit. Find a keyboard shortcut you don't use. Like, probably don't use. That one is assigned to something. Let's do Shift 9. For Deliver, Shift 8. And for Edit, we'll just add a few of these. So assigning a unique number to these so I don't have to come up here again. So once you do this, it should work. There we go. So as you start pressing these buttons, notice what's happening at the bottom here. I'm opening up a whole bunch of stuff. So these keyboard shortcuts are showing stuff that will be there eventually when they release it. It's not there for a reason, right? It's not there because, well, it's not tested. And it's probably broken. And you will probably crash and burn. But here's the good news. They didn't artificially remove it just so you don't have access to it. It just hasn't been fully implemented yet, which means if you're willing to live on the edge and try this, which I've been doing for quite some time, I find this to be amazing because if you need a certain feature, it's there. It's available. So yeah, check this out. There's Edit. You have the full ability to do all of your editing right in here. So yes, the Edit interface works. Fairlight, somewhat. I don't have my mixer. The mixer's broken, not working. I do have the ability to do cool stuff with media, including my clone tool. It's there. However, if you thought you could clone from Dropbox or something like that and it would work better than copying, no, not going to happen. There's still issues there. Okay, clone, not necessarily going to work perfect, but if you have external media, it may work there. What is important here is if you want to do things like select a bunch of clips and then turn them into a multicam right from here, you can do that. You don't have to work with the way it's done inside of Cut. And you could also do that when you're working inside of Edit. You have the full feature there. Additionally, you have all of this really cool stuff, like the ability to do fusion. So let me go back to that one clip that I was talking about before that I wanted to show you. So if you click on here, by the way, all your timelines, you can cycle through them very quickly. If you select the clip and you want to grade this clip, a couple of things that I want to do with this particular shot. First, let me just make it a little smaller so I could actually see more of the shot. I don't care that it's cropped. Let's leave that. Second, what I want to do with this is actually color grade it. So I'm going to go in here, go to my colors, I'm going to hit auto just to have a good starting point. And you can see that looks completely horrible because it doesn't know that you're trying to get that really nice, cool look. So auto doesn't work with stylized shots as much, so you shouldn't rely on that too much. Look at the trace, see what you got going on here. It's not a badly exposed image, but I really want to pull a lot of that color out. So I could go through that three-strip process, but I could also apply certain tools that fix the problems that I have. What do I have in here? Well, it's early morning. I have a lot of haze. I need to dehaze this shot. That's where most of my color's gone. Right? I also want to introduce a little contrast pop. There's a lot of dynamic range, but I don't have any contrast in my clouds. They look flat. They're not really popping out of there. So these are tools that have been developed by Resolve specifically for things like this. If you take a look at some of the Resolve color stuff in here, there's that contrast pop that I talked about. Right? Really cool. I'm going to use that. I'm going to grab that, and there's also the dehaze. I'm going to use that as well. So these are the two tools I'm going to use for this particular shot. Drop that in here. Should I have done that? I could, but should I? Why not? Because I'm going to be limited in what I could do with that node. So the first thing I should do, serial node, then drop my contrast pop on top of that. Serial node, then drop my dehaze on top of that. Boom. So you can see just by dropping these on generic, so there's my little contrast pop. I can increase that a little bit. I'm going to actually increase that a lot just so you see what it does with the clouds. It really gives it a lot of that drama in there for me, so I can actually crank that up, or I can do the opposite and really flatten it and give it that nice little milky look that you would get if you remove all the mid-tone details. So this little contrast pop, great for doing that. And I don't have to worry too much about what part of this image I'm working with. We'll pop that in here. The dehaze allows you to select the color of the haze, which is going to be kind of around there. You can actually display the depth map that's being generated, so you see what's happening there. And you can control the depth of both the shadow and the highlights. And when you turn that up and down, you can see what it's doing to our colors. Really cool. And you could really control that. So I can make this very dramatic very quickly without doing much of anything at all here. And I haven't even touched my color tools in here at all. All right, so very powerful, very fast. If I click on a shot like this that I wanted to stabilize, and I want to stabilize it further, I'm actually going to jump right into Fusion, right in this shot right here. And I want to add a clip to this thing, so let's go ahead to my effects. And I want to find my stabilizers or my tracking tools. There's quite a few in here. Go down to your tracking. I should use a keyboard shortcut for this, but I'm going to show you where it's at. There it is. Track. Where's track? Okay. Sometimes, if you know what you want, like the planner tracker, just drop that in here. Much easier. So that, you just drop that node right in between. Right? And if you miss that node in between, again, the user interface here, not really optimized for an iPad, just letting you know. So you do have to kind of work with it a little bit. So there's our shot. And I want to get in here, and let me make sure. Again, not the greatest interface to work around with. Zoom in there. Let's say I'm going to use that building as the plane that I want to stabilize on. I'm going to draw a box just on this thing right here. And what the hell happened here? I don't know. Again, I promise this will crash. It will, trust me. Let me undo this and let me try this again. I'm going to pick a building here. 1, 2, 3. Just a plane. I just want to put a square on that, right? And all I want to do is just track this forward. So the first thing I need to do is set my reference frame. That's the frame that I'm currently on. And I'm in the middle here, so I'm going to just track back from here to the beginning. Hello. Why is it not doing that? Again, it works when nobody's looking. I guarantee it. Okay, so let's try that one more time. Set as a new frame here. Okay, and track. Okay, it is tracking, sort of. I do not know why it's not cooperating. Let's reset that. I'm going to try that one more time. Draw another box here. Set and track. You know what? I'm going to do it on another clip. Maybe that'll do better. So again, if you select the clip and you bring that clip into Fusion, you should be able to just add a track in here. And my effects, like I said, the user interface on this is not fully released yet. So the fact that we can even do this on an iPad is kind of ridiculous. But if you're learning this tool, or if you need access to it and you don't have a machine, I don't know how else you're going to do this, because there's nothing on an iPad that can do this kind of stuff other than this. Okay, so let's get that back in here. Again, I need to make my UI look a little better. And this is not, see, I'm drawing here instead of moving this thing. That's probably what happened last time. Okay, it's a little better. So I'm going to select the plane and set the keyframe and go ahead and track forward. And it's probably not doing it for whatever reason. Because you know what, when I tested it, I probably didn't have this whole contraption set up here. I don't know what's happening. But once it does track, what you want to do is you set it to give you a steady shot, and it will give you a beautiful, steady look. That's how I got everything looking like it's just sitting still there. A few minutes left? Okay. So I have a few other things I want to show you. I also want to make sure that I do open up to some Q&A. There's more that I'm going to show on the session tomorrow. We do have another session, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the cloud component and working with DaVinci Resolve in the cloud and how we can sync what we're doing here on the iPad to what we're actually doing in our environment where we're working with the full version of Resolve. So, any questions? Interrupt me if you have one. And I'm going to show you something else while we do this. Okay, so I'm going to bring in a few other shots in here and just want to show you how to work with another little clip. So let's go ahead and bring in, you can see all of your tools are available now. If you have cut and edit open at the same time and you go back and forth, what happens is cut disappears and it's gone forever and you only have an edit left. Same thing will happen if you go between Fusion and color enough times, it will disappear. Okay? So the way you get back to it is real simple, don't freak out. Remember how I told you just quit and restart? Every time you do that, it's going to come back to just the two tabs. as if nothing's back. So it's going to reset that for you. So if you want to get all of those controls back, again, remember your keyboard shortcuts. If I remember what I made mine, there they go. You can get all your tools right back in here. So there are a few other things I want to bring in here. So I'm going to import another clip. And this particular clip, I want to show you a look that I was trying to design. Again, this is something I did in the field. I walked into commission chambers. Lighting was horrible. Thank God they wanted a black and white image out of this, so I knew what I was working with. But because I had my iPad and I could quickly take a shot, throw it in there, and work something up, I knew that I can get the result that I wanted out of the shot without very little effort. So I want to show you the process of where I am and how I got there with this particular shot. So these are the final shots. Let me add those, and let me also get the original shots in here. Okay, so this was an interview that I shot with 2 cameras that we're putting together. These are the final shots, as you could see them. The idea was to get this black and white shot, and I wanted to keep the red on his shirt out of it. That look, I mean, probably can't really do justice to this shot, but the original shot looks something like, again, with minimal lighting and what I had in there, not the same, right? So to get the shot to look like that, I'm gonna do a couple of things in here. I'm gonna grab the shot, let's drop that in here. Start with color right away. Now, if we go to our gallery, I'm going to show you how to bring in a look. I actually saved that look, so we don't have to build it from scratch. If I right-click on here, I can import all the looks that have been created before. And if we navigate to our folder where I had all my looks saved, right, I can bring in that 3-stop, or here's a few other things that I have in here. So I'm going to go ahead and select these guys and bring them in. So I have my 2 other looks. So here's the look that I built for this shot. I'm going to drop that in here, and you can take a look at what's going on. Notice that my red from the ambassador is gone in this particular look. It's still there, it's just gone because, well, this particular shot has some masks in there that have been created, and these masks have not been tracked. And if I want that part of it to look, I need to go and find that mask, right? There's that mask. Let's go to my, there we go. I do have a mask here for him. I do have a mask for ambassador here as well for the hat and all that. And this is a slightly different composition because I tracked it for a different part of the image somewhere else before, so I could make that adjustment. And in order to make this work, again, all I have to do is track it. So I can go into my tracker, hit track back and forth. It's going to track this mask. Yep, so it's good. And you should be, where is that? Why am I not seeing it? For whatever reason, I'm not seeing it. There it is. That's weird. There it is. Weird. So there's that mask. You can see it's on his head still. So if I go back here, let me just retract that. That mask is a little too high up here. So that's all I have to do is just retract that part for that mask. But there's that particular shot. So what I'm doing in this particular shot, as you can see, I have a parallel mix of 2 things happening. One, and in order to see anything isolated, if I hit Shift-H, it will allow me to isolate and show you what's happening in that particular node. So you can see I'm doing a qualifier here where I'm just keying a color, and then I'm masking it out to make sure that it doesn't pull that red from anywhere else, like his skin tones. So it's just pulling it from the shirt, right? And I'm using a parallel mixer to then take it and mix it with this particular node. And this particular node is not just a black and white node. I didn't desaturate this. I wanted to make sure that I took the approach that Ansel Adams would to take a photograph when it's black and white. What did Ansel Adams do? He put a red filter, a green filter, or a blue filter in front of his black and white film in order to give it that deep color contrast that you would get by filtering out specific colors. We looked at this today. How do we do that? Anybody remember? RGB mixer, right? So if I make it monochrome, so let's go back for a second to this particular shot. I'm going to go ahead and go to a different version of it. I'm going to create a new version of it, version 2, right? And I'm going to go ahead and just reset this version 2. And I'm going to turn it to monochrome. And you can see just making it monochrome, it looks kind of lame here, right, compared to the other one. So you could mix your red. Look at how it brings out his skin tones. Your greens, it gets the background and the shirt back in here, and the blues a little bit. And now you have a really nice black and white where you can actually bring out all the individual colors just by mixing those RGBs. Not the same as just desaturating something, right? You desaturate something, you're not going to create the contrast in those colors at all. This allows you to do that. So that was the first part. That's all put together with that. And then all I just created is a garbage map in here by doing a vignette. So a vignette is a very powerful tool. I'm going to show it to you on this particular one here, this particular shot. So what you do with the vignette is, if you add another node, you have the ability to add multiple power windows, is what we call them in Resolve. In Resolve, power windows are really windows because you're kind of thinking of light and you want to limit where you have light or a light, so that's what they call them in here. But they're really shapes that you can track over time, and they're really sophisticated shapes. And some of them could be just a square, right? You could turn that on. This gives you that particular mask, or a circular mask, or you could do all these different things. You could even do just a gradient mask. So these windows allow you to qualify a certain part of an image. For example, you know how I said I could do some crazy compositing and stuff in here? Well, if I look in my clips here, like, let's go to get out of my gallery here for a second. Where's everything here? Where are my, let's go back into our color here, and I want to add one more shot here. Let's go ahead and import this little goldfish here. Okay, and this particular goldfish, let's see, I want it swimming on top of this thing. I want to key it and do a quick little composite. So compositing could not be easier in working with color. So if I drop this right on top, what I'm going to get is this fish in here. If I jump this into color, in my color, I don't have anything but RGB that I'm working with. So if I'm going to do any kind of a key or operation, I need to output it back into my timeline. So I need to add alpha to it. So that's real simple. I can do that by first right-clicking on here, or click and hold, click and hold. Clicking and holding can take a while sometimes. Okay, and we're going to, oh, come on, add alpha output. We could do the 3 dots there. And that means whatever alpha this has, we're going to output back into our timeline. So now we're outputting to our timeline. So this is the in from the timeline. This is the out to the timeline. We're coming in with RGB. We're going to make an alpha in here, and we're going to output it to the timeline. And to make the alpha real simple, this qualifier right here allows us to key using HSL, or you could use a couple of other things, including the 3D key, which allows me to just drag a selection somewhere. I'm going to not like that one. I'm going to undo that. And just drag it on this green part. Great, lovely. My matte needs to be inverted, obviously. So if I can invert my matte by going to my matte tools, there's my qualifier. I can invert the qualifier. Boom, look at that. I have a nice little matte. I can go back to my key tools here. And if you click on the highlight tool right here, you can actually see it comped in there, right? If you turn that off, which is really cool. But if you're looking at it individually, you could actually go to my little black and white and see the matte that's being generated. And if you go into matte finesse, you can control the pre-filter, the cleaning of the blacks, the whites, the clipping of them, all kinds of wonderful stuff. Most importantly, I'm going to hit Shift-H, and you see that green stuff that's happening there, that spill? I can crank up my D-spill, and there's no more green. Now, in order to see them comped, you could basically hit Shift-H, make sure they're mixed, and there are my 2 shots. And to color match them, I want my fish, or the background to match my fish a little bit more. I can just select the 2, right-click on here, and choose Match Shot to this clip, right? So now this is going to get the tone to match that particular shot. Did we actually see that happen there? A little bit. It did do something. I thought it did. Okay, so we want to match shot to this clip. Oh, see, it's not allowing me to click and hold both of them. It switched it off. That's why I didn't do it. So it matches the background, so my colors are somewhat matched, and I'm good to go. So, I mean, this is a real basic composite in here. Obviously, we have fusion, and we have so much more. I didn't even get into the sky replacement node, the beauty nodes, the face detect. Like, if you're doing beauty work with people, right? Here's a guy, right? He needs some beauty work. We definitely need to get into his face. I'm going to right-click on here, just reset this node. I want to get a little bit closer, just so we see what's going on there. Let me just to make it a little brighter. This shot really needs a lot of work. I'm just going to auto-color it just so we see. But most importantly, I want to work on his face. Look at that lighting. It's really harsh there. What if I want to soften up and work just on his face? Just on his skin tones, I can do what's called beauty. It's one of the really cool tools in here. And if I just apply beauty, it allows for me to flatten or to filter out. And you could see it soften out the skin tones. They look really pretty. I mean, you really have to get in there to see what that's doing there. Let me get a little tighter. You could kind of see that. You'll see a lot more of it once I do the next one. So beauty has a couple of really nice options. It has Ultra Beauty, it has an advanced mode. This is basically frequency separation. You can get in there and you can have your high filter that has all of the details in it, and you can get in there and soften up all of the blemishes and details by blurring them and reapply the texture back to bring it back. So this is professional type of retouching that you're doing with skin with this beauty thing here. One of the coolest things though is not necessarily this one, because this one you can actually just apply to anything, right? So anything with people in it that you're not gonna spend a lot of time on close-ups is great. But if you're gonna spend a lot of time on anything else, it's the face refinement. And the face refinement, in my opinion, is one of the coolest things I've ever seen for a variety of reasons. If you take a close look at his face, in order for me to color correct his eyes, to get rid of the bags under his eyes, to do any of that, I need to first track and mask out his face. That's a lot of work. Face Detect does that automatically. If I hit Analyze and step back, you can see it tracks his face for me while I sit back and drink my coffee. Very cool feature. So that's tracked, it's rock solid. All I have to do is now start working with the different modes on here. You can see I have my auto mode for beauty. I have all these lovely things, and the same stuff that I was doing with skin, I could do here as well. That's all great. What I'm gonna do is actually turn off my overlay and really zoom in there so you could see some of the other things that I wanna do. You could see on this little settings tab that I have a lot of color grading controls, but more importantly, because I did track separate parts of his face, I could break his face apart and get in there and work on just the eyes, the chin, the lips, or those different things. So I want to do most of my work in the eyes here. I'm gonna sharpen the eyes just a little bit. First thing I do is I get rid of all the sharpening in camera. I love my cameras, they're great, they're beautiful, but when they sharpen in camera, they look digital, they look like crap. And those beautiful lenses that I have that have character, all don't have that character. So the first thing I do if I shoot camera raw is I get rid of any sharpening in camera, right? So my C70 comes in with 10 sharpening on there. If I'm not careful, if I go into my raw settings, I set it to, everything looks milky and soft now, especially eyeballs when things are that soft. And what you want is to look at your subject. So adding a little sharpness to the eyes where everything else is soft, that's exactly what you can do with this little particular slider. So I'm gonna go crazy, and you can see they're much sharper now, or not, you can see the difference there. Brightening adds a little bit of white to the whites of the eyes. If you go too far, that guy looks like he's an Anokani from a different planet or something. Let's not do that. If I go into my eye light, that shines a little square little light in there as if that's being lit. And most importantly, the eye bag removal can actually go ahead and make him look 10 years younger. So that didn't look like I did much. But if you look at that before and after, and you realize that you don't have to track that it's playing back in real time and it's perfect and good to go, that is a great tool to have in your quiver. If you shot that sky like me that looks really not great because it's got not a single cloud in there and you want clouds, there's a sky replacement node in here that'll do that as well for you. There's so many cool, there's a new node which just blew me away. You guys have to go to the show floor and ask them to show you the relight node. Yes, it actually can pull a normal map and use that normal map to relight your footage. Not just like a cheesy little bevel thing, light thing that you see in After Effects or something. You can actually use 2 nodes instead of 1, and use 1 node to generate normals, and then use those normals to now relight your scene. It's basically, they're taking stuff out of Fusion and popping that into color. It's crazy, it's really cool. So, what's going on here? A lot of stuff playing. So, I'm gonna show you a lot more stuff tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thanks.